Today in this video I'm going to show you how I took this finish damage and made it look like this. What kind of guitar is this? It's an Epiphone archtop. It's a Olympic model, and from the serial number it appears to be around an early 50s, maybe 1951. We're going to do a major upgrade to this bridge. That's going to come in a later video. But in this video, we're going to focus on the finish damage. It already had a refret, so we're not going to touch these frets. Some of the finish damage that is going on here is this headstock has this reptilian effect going on. It's got some body damage. We're not going to do all of it. We want to keep that look, but these in particular really stick out and bother them. So we're going to do something about those stripes and this finish over here by the upper bow. So if that sounds all good, let's go ahead and get started. One of the main things I want to take care of are these finish damages. Mostly these three strips here. There's another one here. So I told the owner of the guitar that he's got two options. Basically, you could try and touch this up and match the color and drop in some lacquer and try to create a patch on the finish. The other option is to strip it all back, take it all down to wood, and put a new finish on it. So before we do that, we're going to try and do a little patch. I'll send him a picture of it and see what he thinks. I think I'm going to try to do this one here. Try to color match that and get some finish on there and then see what he thinks, because it's obviously not a perfect finish. 75 years old. Is that right? Something like that. It's old. Let's see what we can do about patching that. Color match that best we can. Get a little finish on there. We'll do a patch, send it to the customer, and see what he thinks. I have some shellac, and I've got some dyes and some yellow colorant. This is like a universal tint. So I have dark brown, this is saddle tan, and some yellow. So first want to try to get that color, which is kind of a brownish color, but it's got a little yellow to it. And it's got to be a little bit darker. Let's test that out. This is shellac here. Just going to take a little shellac and the dye and then go test it out. Okay, obviously not dark enough. It's got to be a little bit more opaque. This yellow makes it opaque. Add some opacity to it. Yellow, dark brown. Let's give this a shot. That's not horrible. You can see it seeps up in there and creates this dark edging. But let me continue and finish in that whole area, and then I might have to do a couple layers of this to get the color to sit right. Not terrible. It's actually pretty close. Depends on which angle you look at it. But if you stand back now, well, you can still see it. But don't forget, it doesn't have the finish on it. And it does need to get probably a little bit darker. Yeah, darker. And take that same color and just add in a little bit of yellow to it. Hope this doesn't get too green. looking at just the color of that, it's not too bad. Just gonna get a couple little surrounding areas. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry right there. I could start adding some finish to this. Okay, I'll let that dry. Here I'm taking 50% lacquer, 50% retarder. And I'm just gonna drop it in there and get a light layer just to seal this in there. You can see it wick underneath the finish. It's probably not a bad thing because it helps kind of hold the finish that is lifting, cracking. Maybe it'll glue it in place a little bit, help hold it down. Does it look perfect? No, but I'll show you something. So I did some patches on the back right here. These don't look good at all, I think. They look a little purple, very dark. But when you stand back, at least it fills in a lot of that contrast. So that's kind of the idea here, is to get that to be not so noticeable. The other thing I could try to do, just thought of it, is to take this same lacquer retarder mixture and brush it just outside of the zone and see if that darkens up the finish a little bit so it doesn't have that ghosting appearance. Now this will dry and get lighter. That's a little bit better. Now it doesn't have that ghost around the outside. Now the finish is not as thick. You know, you can see it's still flat on the wood. So it's gonna take several layers. Probably I'll start going in with straight lacquer and that'll build up the thickness. But now we got a nice kind of shiny, true to color area around it to match. I think that wood color I put on there is pretty good. That was step, I don't know, 2, 3. Now let's move on to the next step. Okay, now I have the surface perfectly flat, fairly flat anyway. I got some straight lacquer. I'm gonna drop in here and try to create a thickness to match the existing. You know, this is going to dry and shrink, so it won't look quite as bubbly. It'll probably flatten out quite a bit, but you can see it is filling in some of the thickness of that original lacquer. You can see from this angle you can't even see it. So this might be okay. Just gonna let this dry. This headstock plate, it's got a little bit of separation right here. First, I'm gonna go in with a little blade and some sandpaper, trying to clean off a little area. So the glue will stick a little better by cleaning that out. I'm going to take some Type-On and a little syringe. Now this area has shrunken back a little bit, so I'm going to add another layer, try to build it up a little bit more. Okay, now I'm going to let that dry and see what that looks like. I did a little bit of work off camera and sent the photograph of this to the owner of the guitar, and he likes it. He thinks that'll work. It's going to need a little bit more lacquer just to kind of even up some of the finish, but I'm going to go ahead and get started in this section here. What I learned from this is the finish being so thick, to try to build it up to that without first wet sanding this little transition makes it a little harder. So I think I'm going to wet sand this out first and try to just soften this high ridge around all this existing finish, and then I'm gonna just finish it off the same way I did this one, and probably do an overspray from here to here, mostly here, but I'm gonna add a little bit to this as well. So let me get wet sanding on this part first. I also have another trick up my sleeve that I'm going to show you a little later that I think will definitely improve the way this is going to come out. So I know I said I was going to wet sand this, but I think that would be kind of wrong because this is bare wood, and if I start wet sanding this, the moisture gets into the wood. It could cause issues with this finish that's already here. So I'm just going to dry sand it. I'm using 1000 grit paper, and I just want to kind of soften this transition subtly. This is naphtha, just to clean up the surface. This will dry very fast. Now I barely feel that ridge. I have this other spot over here. Just gonna take some of these right off. I'm going to take the solution, 1 part lacquer, 1 part lacquer retarder. And this is going to get underneath all the loose finish and helpfully kind of glue it down to the body and also seal the wood up so I can add stain without it penetrating too far under the finish. Now just sit back and watch this come to life. Now with the color added and the lacquer applied, I'm going to spray on some top coats to help build up the finish so I can sand it back and make it perfectly level. Now I ended up putting about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 coats of a clear lacquer, and you can see, I don't know, maybe you can't see, but it's got quite a thickness on it. So I'm going to sand this down as flush as possible. Now I'm going to attempt to do something with this headstock. I've got a solution of 50% lacquer, 50% lacquer retarder, and I'm going to brush this on here, and this should help solidify it and kind of seal it down and hopefully make it look a little bit better too. I got this trick from my buddy Scott over at Harpeth Guitar Restoration. You can check out his channel on YouTube. He did this to an entire guitar. I thought that would be perfect for this headstock. You can see what that looks like. It's almost dry now. Remember, I told you I had a little trick up my sleeve. Well, I'm going to use a little tobacco brown to carry out this sunburst effect that's going on the guitar, and it'll help cover up some of the uneven look to the finish, especially in this waist, and it'll also help on this upper bout as well. So after the color coat, I added a couple of coats of a clear lacquer and let that dry for a few days. Did some wet sanding to even it all up, get rid of some of the orange peel that was in the finish. And now just doing a final buffing. Call the finish part of this project completed. The next thing I need to do is build a new bridge, which is a different thing for me. I've never built this type of a bridge before, so stay tuned for that one. That should be interesting, and it will actually help the sound of this guitar quite a bit as well. We're going to do a little sound comparison before and after, so stay tuned for that video.
That's about it.
So here's the bass side.
And here's this side. The rest of it is just going to stay like that.
If you like this type of content, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a trick.